a retired professor, a war dog trained to protect, and 3 officers who thought no one would be watching. One quiet walk at sunset turned into a national reckoning because when they tried to corner her, they didn't know. She'd spent her whole life preparing to stand. Dear viewer, what you are about to witness is not just a story. It is a powerful testament to the quiet power and pursuit of justice in places most people ignore. If this is your first time here, I warmly invite you to share where you are watching in the comments below. And if stories like this move you, challenge you, or make you think, consider subscribing and clicking the bell icon. We share voices that deserve to be heard every day. Thank you for being here. Now let's get into the story. Under the fading glow of a Santa Barbara sunset, Eleanor Jameson clipped the leash onto her dog's collar with a steadiness that masked the storm within her. The breeze rolled off the Pacific in lazy waves, brushing salt against her cheeks, while the sky melted from gold into a bruise-colored purple. It should have been a perfect evening, just like the hundreds before it. But tonight the stillness didn't soothe her. It warned her. Titan stood tall beside her, a hulking Belgian Malinois, with eyes too intelligent to be mistaken for anything less than a soldier. He wasn't just a pet. He was a living legacy. Her late wife, Camille, had trained him before cancer took her. Camille had been everything: an Air Force handler, a protector, a stubborn believer in Eleanor's quiet strength. Titan had been Camille's final project, and when the military deemed him too sensitive for combat, Camille had brought him home instead. "That a dog doesn't follow commands," she'd once whispered with a wink. "He follows hearts," and Eleanor's was the only one left to follow. She reached for the necklace that never left her skin. Camille's dog tags still warm from the touch of her chest. Each step she took down the winding trail along the Santa Barbara cliffs felt heavier lately. Not because of age, Eleanor was stronger than most women half her age, but because something in the air had changed. A current had shifted. There were fewer waves from neighbors, now more lingering stares, more silence. Titan walked with a grace that belied his power, ever watchful, scanning every porch, every alley, every car parked too long on the wrong side of the street. He stopped short at the corner near Mission Ridge, ears twitching. Eleanor followed his gaze. A black and white patrol car idled 2 blocks down, lights off, engine running. She narrowed her eyes. That cruiser hadn't been part of this neighborhood for long. Neither had the men inside it. She turned away, telling herself what every black woman in America has been forced to believe. At some point, keep moving. Don't give them a reason. Don't make eye contact. Don't give fear a place to settle. But fear doesn't need permission. It finds cracks in armor you thought was impenetrable. A voice in her head, Camille's, echoed firm as ever. Walk like you own the ground, Elle. Walk like they can't erase you. So she did. As the sun dipped below the horizon, throwing the world into a dim watercolor haze, Eleanor kept her pace steady. Each footfall, a memory. Each breath, a refusal to shrink. She wasn't walking just to stretch her legs. She was walking to remember who she was when the world tried to forget. What she didn't see, what no one did, was that 3 men in uniform had already marked her. Not as a neighbor, not as a woman, not even as a citizen, as a problem. The town of Santa Barbara didn't like its problems loud. It liked them silent, out of sight. Eleanor was neither. Her pride wasn't performative. It was effortless. The way she held her shoulders, the way she corrected the cashier who tried to call her Miss instead of Professor, The way she still wore Camille's tags, daring the world to ask what they meant. She was a relic of a world some men hated, one where black women didn't apologize for existing. And the men in that car, they noticed. It began 3 weeks ago. Subtle. The same cruiser slowing just a little too much when she passed. The same trio of officers who suddenly seemed to be everywhere, at the gas station, at the dog park, leaning on their cruiser just around the corner from her home, doing nothing but watching. Clay Brenner, the sergeant, with the politician's smile and a bitterness he carried like brass knuckles. Matt Riley, too green to know better, too scared to walk away. And Drew Watkins, the type who laughed just a second too long when someone else was hurting. They never said much. But then again, intimidation didn't always need words. Tonight, they didn't drive away. Titan's growl started low. A warning. Eleanor's fingers tightened on the leash. She didn't look back, didn't flinch. But she knew. She was being hunted. And for the first time in years, she felt it in her bones. This was no longer about a walk. This was no longer about routine. This was a test of her presence, of her voice, of her right to exist proudly publicly without asking permission. What those men didn't know, what they'd failed to see in all their watching, was that Eleanor Jameson had been fighting her entire life. For a seat in classrooms that weren't built for her. For promotions that had her working twice as hard for half the recognition. For a marriage most of this country still refused to fully respect. She'd buried her wife with one hand and stood tall with the other. She had no more room for fear, only room for resolve. She turned off the cliffside trail and onto Calle Poniente, the road that curved back toward town. Titan's body shifted more alert now. The cruiser's engine purred closer, not fast, just close enough to let her know they weren't done. Eleanor glanced up at the darkening sky. One last sliver of sunlight cut through the clouds like a blade. She let it warm her face. Let them follow, she thought. Let them watch. You picked the wrong woman, and the right dog is watching. The next day, Eleanor Jameson walked the same path, but the air around her felt irrevocably altered. The trail didn't hold the same peace it once offered. The whispers of the waves were still there, and the distant scent of eucalyptus still floated in from the trees, but something else lingered now, something sour and sharp, the kind of presence that didn't announce itself out loud, but clung to your skin like smoke. Titan walked slightly ahead of her. His stride, deliberate ears perked, always sensing more than she could. He wasn't tense, not yet, but he was listening, reading the invisible. Eleanor followed his rhythm. Her fingers curled tightly around the leash, her other hand brushing the metal tags that hung just below her collarbone. Camille's tags. They felt heavier today. She had slept restlessly the night before. Every creak in the floorboards pulled her awake. Every groan of the wind felt like a presence on the other side of her window. But she rose that morning like she always did, with her dignity intact. That was the one thing the world had never been able to steal from her. It was the thing Camille had most admired about her. As Eleanor turned onto Olive Street, she spotted the patrol car again. Same vehicle, same officers. This time, they didn't idle from a distance. They were parked directly across from the coffee shop, angled like a threat. Officer Clay Brenner leaned against the driver's door arms, folded sunglasses on, despite the cloud cover. His jaw clenched, even as his face wore that forced, practiced grin. Officer Matt Riley stood off to the side, pretending to scroll through his phone eyes, flicking up every few seconds. And Officer Drew Watkins. He leaned against the hood, twirling his baton, idly like he was already bored with the performance. Eleanor kept walking, chin lifted. She didn't deviate. She didn't slow down. Her gait was that of a woman with somewhere to be, even if her destination was silence. "Morning," Ma'am Clay called as she approached his tone, mocking politeness, so thin it may as well have been scorn. She didn't stop. "Officers," she replied with a calm that was almost defiant. "Walking that big old dog again," Drew added, flicking the baton against his thigh. "Hope he's not too much for you." Titan turned his head, just slightly recognizing something beneath the tone. Clay took a slow step forward, resting a hand on his duty belt. "Pretty dog. What's he trained for?" Eleanor stopped then, just for a moment. Not because she was intimidated, but because this was no longer passive. This was performance. "He's trained to protect," she said, turning her eyes to Clay, "and to recognize danger." There was a flicker behind his eyes, then the briefest crack in his polished exterior. But he recovered quickly, smirking, like a man who still thought he held every card in the deck. "You know," he said casually, "we've had a couple of complaints lately. People nervous about a big dog like that roaming the neighborhood." "He's on a leash," Eleanor replied, "as is required by law." "Sure," Clay nodded. "But nerves are nerves. Perception matters, especially these days." Eleanor tilted her head. "Is this a warning, Sergeant Brenner?" He shrugged, "Just looking out for the safety of the community." "Are you?" she said, her voice suddenly sharper. "Because it seems more like you're trying to remind me that you're watching." The smile disappeared, only for a breath. Then Clay stepped back. "Enjoy your walk, ma'am." But she could feel it. The air between them had shifted again, like a storm cloud sliding over the sun. Eleanor walked on, but this time, Titan stayed closer. As she turned onto Laguna Street, she passed a woman pushing a stroller who suddenly crossed to the other side of the road. No eye contact, no smile, just distance. It wasn't the first time. This town, once warm with nods and idle chatter, had cooled in a way she couldn't quite name. The eyes that looked at her now were different. They no longer simply saw a neighbor or a retired professor or the woman who always brought banana bread to the Sunday food pantry. They saw something else. Something they hadn't chosen but had been told to fear. She walked past the corner bookstore. The young man behind the counter, who usually waved when she passed, looked up and quickly looked away. Eleanor felt the sting of it. Not because she needed his approval, but because the silence confirmed what she had feared. Something had started. She reached the park near the courthouse, a small green strip with benches and a low iron fence, and sat for a moment, letting Titan sit at her feet. He didn't relax. Neither did she. Two older women walked by their conversation, cutting off the moment they noticed her. One offered a tight smile. The other clutched her purse a little tighter. Eleanor wasn't new to this. She had lived it in lecture halls and faculty lounges and hotel lobbies and department stores, but it never got easier. Because every time it happened, it chipped at something unseen, something hard-earned. She pulled out her phone and opened an old voice memo Camille had recorded years ago when she knew her time was short. It was only 12 seconds long. "L, whatever happens, walk like you always have. Don't let anyone shrink you, especially not when they smile while they're doing it." Eleanor played it twice, then put the phone away. She stood. Titan rose with her. As they headed home, she noticed the cruiser again this time parked further down, almost hidden behind a row of hedges. Watching. They were studying her now, not just following, not just patrolling, studying. And Eleanor knew exactly what they were looking for. Fear. She would not give it to them. But the silence around her was no longer quiet. It was listening, and it was sharpening its teeth. The third time they followed her, it wasn't subtle. Eleanor Jameson had taken Titan along a quieter route that evening, one that curved behind the old mission church and snaked through a gravel path surrounded by oaks. It was where Camille used to take her during the early days of their relationship, back when they were still learning how to be visible without apology. The path had always felt sacred, a stretch of earth that had never asked Eleanor to shrink. That made what happened next all the more bitter. Titan paused first. His body stiffened, and his tail straightened no longer, wagging gently as it had just moments before. Eleanor stopped immediately, her fingers tightening on the leash. She turned her head slightly enough to catch the glint of headlights behind her. The cruiser was there again. This time, it didn't idle. It rolled slowly toward her headlights, off, moving like a predator, trying not to spook its prey. There was no sound but the crunch of tires on loose stone and the faint metallic whine of an engine resisting inertia. Eleanor didn't move. Clay Brenner was behind the wheel. Drew Watkins sat in the passenger seat, and Matt Riley leaned forward from the back seat like a child watching something he didn't fully understand. The car stopped 10 feet away. Eleanor glanced around. No one. The mission grounds were empty, and the sun had nearly disappeared. The quiet here, which used to feel holy now, throbbed like a warning. Clay got out first, smoothing his uniform shirt, as if preparing for a speech. Drew followed, cracking his knuckles, the baton already in his hand, though still resting at his side. Matt stayed back, his face pale through the windshield. Clay smiled. Evening again, Miss Jameson. Beautiful night, isn't it? Titan growled low, a sound that started somewhere deep and ancient. Eleanor didn't look away from Clay. You're not here to talk about the weather, she said. Clay walked closer. You've got it wrong, he said. We're just making sure everyone feels safe around here. Are you? Eleanor asked. Because I don't. Clay feigned a laugh, turning to Drew. You hear that? She says we're making her nervous. Drew didn't laugh. He stepped to the side, beginning to slowly circle her. Eleanor turned with him, keeping Titan between them. You're not allowed to do this, she said firmly. Clay shrugged. We're not doing anything. Yet. Drew stepped closer. Mind if I see that chain? He asked, nodding at the tags around her neck. They're not yours to see, Eleanor replied. He reached out anyway. Eleanor didn't flinch. She had known this moment was coming. Maybe not tonight, maybe not here. But it had been promised in every sideways look, every polite threat, every fake smile layered over resentment. She gave a single word. Guard. Titan moved so fast, Drew didn't even finish his reach. The dog's body blocked the path between them, a wall of snarling precision. He didn't leap or bite. Not yet. But he growled, long teeth-bared body lowered and ready. Drew staggered back, his face stunned. Clay took a step forward, hand now hovering near his firearm. Call him off, he warned. Now. Eleanor didn't move. He hasn't touched you, Lady Clay said, his voice turning the performance slipping. This isn't going to end well for you. You're right, she said, eyes fixed on him. It won't, for you. Behind them, somewhere far above the rooftops, something buzzed faintly. A small drone hovered silently overhead, unnoticed by the officers. A teenage boy named Jordan Ellis had launched it an hour earlier, testing his new gimbal. He hadn't expected to capture anything, but when he saw the cruiser stalking Eleanor, he had started recording. Below, the tension fractured. Drew tried to recover his bravado. "You really think that dog's gonna save you?" "No," Eleanor said calmly. "I don't need saving." Clay took another step. "We can say you sicked him on us, that you felt threatened, that he snapped." Eleanor looked down at Titan, who hadn't moved, every muscle still holding. "And your body cams," she asked, "are they conveniently off tonight?" Clay didn't answer. Then she said something that made all three of them hesitate. "You may have power, Sergeant, but I have something you don't." Clay scoffed. "What's that, witnesses?" She didn't look up, didn't need to, but she knew someone was watching. Because someone always was. If not this boy with his drone, then someone else. A neighbor. A stranger. The kind of person who, like her, had grown tired of pretending not to see. Drew's eyes darted to the rooftops, finally hearing the faint hum. "Shit," he muttered. Clay turned to look, saw the blinking light, and cursed under his breath. Eleanor didn't wait. "Tighten," she whispered. "Heel." The dog relaxed just enough to take his place at her side, still alert, still brimming with fury, barely contained. Eleanor walked past them, her steps measured, each one deliberate. Clay didn't move. Neither did Drew. Matt Riley stepped out of the cruiser, then slowly looking like he'd seen a ghost. He watched her go with something that looked a lot like regret. "You good with this?" he asked his partners quietly, but they didn't answer. Eleanor didn't look back, not even once. Later that night, Jordan would upload the footage. No voiceovers, no edits, just raw film. The silent predator crawl of the cruiser, the slow surround, the sudden change in Titan's posture. The moment Drew reached, the moment Eleanor commanded. The frozen expressions of three officers who had clearly expected no resistance, no cameras, no accountability. The video would be seen, shared, discussed. But that was all to come. In that moment, walking home through the dim light with Titan at her side, Eleanor felt her pulse finally start to settle. Not because she was safe, but because she had chosen not to shrink. Loyalty doesn't bark until it has to. And when it does, it speaks with teeth. By sunrise, the next morning, Eleanor Jameson's name was on more tongues than she could count. Not because she'd spoken at a rally or written some searing op-ed, but because someone had finally seen what the silence had allowed to thrive. The drone footage uploaded by Jordan Ellis spread faster than gossip on a Sunday. It was raw, grainy, but unmistakable. Three officers in a cruiser confronting a lone woman with her dog, the escalating tension, the command, the restraint. It was all there, and once it was out, there was no putting it back. Within hours, the footage had over 10,000 views. By noon, a journalist from a regional news outlet reached out. That same afternoon, Walk with Eleanor started trending across local feeds. Strangers reposted the video with quiet fury. Others left comments that split like cracked glass down the middle. Brave, unbelievable courage. She's making it about race. She escalated it. She had that dog trained to attack. Thank God someone finally showed what those officers are doing. The town of Santa Barbara, once comfortably apolitical in its perception of itself, was cracking open, and everyone was being asked quietly, uncomfortably, to pick a side. Some didn't want to. Some wished the whole thing would disappear. Others couldn't help but stare, unable to look away from the image of Eleanor standing with Titan refusing to shrink. Eleanor didn't check the internet. She didn't need to. The reactions were already making their way to her doorstep. When she stepped onto her front porch the next day, coffee in hand, Titan by her feet, a car slowed as it passed. The driver didn't wave, didn't smile, just watched her through the window, eyes hard and unreadable. Down the street, her neighbor Gail, who once brought over fresh oranges every other Sunday, crossed to the far sidewalk with her grocery bags. Didn't stop. Didn't meet her gaze. At the same time, a boy on a bicycle, someone she didn't recognize, shouted, "We got your back." Ms. Jameson before pedaling off, like he'd just told the truth too loud. She appreciated that. But the divide wasn't about volume. It was about proximity. Eleanor could feel it now, everywhere she went. The way people measured their distance from her like it meant something, as if acknowledging her too fully would force them to confront the reality of what they'd seen on screen. Some of them believed her. Some of them believed the silence. She took Titan to the weekly Veterans Brunch on Thursday, an event Camille had helped organize for years before her death. This time, the room was quieter, the conversations more strained. Eleanor took a seat near the end of the buffet table next to a widowed Marine named Susan, who offered her a gentle nod and passed her a glass of orange juice without a word. The chair to Eleanor's right remained empty the entire morning. Later that afternoon, her phone rang. It was Deputy Mariah Lake. Eleanor Mariah said, her voice quiet but firm. "I just left a meeting with the district attorney. We're officially opening an investigation. And Layla Carson, she's taking point." Eleanor set her mug down slowly. "You're moving forward." Mariah paused. "We have to. The footage. It's damning. But so are the patterns we're uncovering." "Patterns?" Eleanor asked. "They've been stopping people. Black residents mostly. Questioning them without cause. The difference is you had a witness. And a dog who didn't back down. There was a beat of silence between them." "What does that mean for me?" Eleanor finally asked. Mariah exhaled. "It means things will get louder before they get better." That night, someone spray painted the word liar across Eleanor's mailbox. The next morning, a bouquet of yellow tulips showed up on her porch, no note attached. When she went to the local market, the owner, Mr. Halvorsen, looked at her longer than he usually did. "I saw the video," he muttered, handing her a receipt. "You shouldn't have talked back to them." Eleanor stared at him. "So I should have let them corner me." "They didn't touch you," he said. "Sometimes things look worse than they are." Eleanor's mouth twitched, but she didn't give him the satisfaction of anger. Sometimes, she said, things are exactly what they look like. People just don't want to call them by their name. Outside the store, a young woman placed a hand on Eleanor's arm as she passed. "I showed the video to my daughter," she whispered. "She thinks you're a hero." Eleanor walked home slowly that day, the weight of contradiction pressing into her shoulders like a second spine. She didn't want to be anyone's symbol. She wanted the right to walk her dog without fear. She wanted to be seen for who she was not, who people needed her to represent. But she also knew that silence was a collaborator, and she was done being quiet. Layla Carson called her that evening. "I'd like to meet in person," the ADA said. "We have a strong case, but only if you're willing to testify." Eleanor didn't hesitate. "I am." Layla's tone softened. "I'm not going to lie. You'll be under a microscope. They'll dig. They'll question your memory, your motive, your temperament. I've been questioned my entire life, Eleanor said. Let them come. She hung up and leaned back against her chair. Titan lay beside her eyes, watching the horizon, like he was reading it for storms. Eleanor reached down and stroked his fur, the rhythm grounding her. Whatever happens, she whispered, we won't do it small. The town had chosen sides, but so had she. And she would not be moved. The courthouse was colder than Eleanor Jameson expected, not in temperature, but in presence. Its marble floors and vaulted ceilings swallowed sound made even the loudest voices seem small. As she sat at the front of the courtroom, waiting to be called to the stand, she felt the weight of every eye behind her. Some curious, some doubtful, some hoping she would falter. Titan wasn't allowed inside, but she could almost feel him outside those walls, as steady as he'd always been. He was her anchor. But in here, Eleanor stood alone. Layla Carson sat beside her, flipping through notes with calm, practiced movements. The assistant district attorney had warned her this trial would be a performance, a war of versions. The defense had already started shaping the officers, Clay Brenner, Drew Watkins, and Matt Riley, as men under pressure caught in a misunderstood interaction. The words were carefully chosen, euphemistic, designed to pull just enough doubt into the room. But when the drone footage played, the energy shifted. The courtroom watched in absolute silence as the grainy scene unfolded, the slow roll of the cruiser, the officers surrounding Eleanor, the reach toward her tags, Titan's sudden step forward, and Eleanor's unwavering posture. No narration, no sound, but the wind and the weight of implication. Then her name was called. She walked to the stand with a stillness that carried its own gravity. Sworn in, she sat straight hands, folded eyes level with the jury. Layla's questions were simple, precise. Eleanor told the truth, not just of what happened that night, but of what it meant. She described the pattern, the slow erosion of peace in her neighborhood, the looks, the shadows, the casual remarks wrapped in concern. And then she spoke of Camille, of the dog tags, of Titan's training not in violence, but in loyalty, and finally, of the choice she had made that night to stand her ground. When Layla asked, "What did you feel in that moment?" Eleanor paused. Then she answered, voice low but steady, "I felt like I had come to the edge of something. Not fear, not quite, but something close. And I knew if I gave in, I would never stop giving in. So I chose not to." The courtroom held its breath. Then came the defense. The lawyer paced like he was drawing circles around her. He questioned her memory, her intentions, her decision to walk where she did at the time she did. He asked whether Titan was trained to attack, whether she had exaggerated the officer's behavior. Eleanor didn't blink. "If telling the truth sounds exaggerated," she said calmly, "you may not have been listening for it long enough." By the time she stepped down, something had changed. Not just in the courtroom, but in the people watching. She had not raised her voice. She had not pointed fingers. But she had dismantled the illusion that what happened was confusion. It had been calculated, it had been controlled, and it had nearly been invisible. The verdict came 2 days later. Guilty. On all counts. Clay Brenner's expression didn't shift as the words were read. Drew Watkins looked away. Matt Riley sat with his hands clenched, eyes wet with something that might have been shame. Eleanor didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just breathed deeply, fully for the first time in weeks. Outside the courthouse, Titan was waiting. When she stepped into the light, he rose and came to her without hesitation. She crouched beside him, pressed her forehead to his. "We did it," she whispered. "We held the line." And in that moment, with the fire behind her and the wind in her lungs, Eleanor Jameson felt something she hadn't in a long time. Free. Eleanor Jameson didn't set out to become a symbol. She was simply a woman walking her dog, honoring the quiet ritual she'd built in the wake of grief, grounding herself in memory and movement. But sometimes, history finds us in the moments we least expect and demands we choose who we are. When the officers began their slow campaign of intimidation, Eleanor could have chosen silence. She could have walked a different route. She could have convinced herself that fear was just a misunderstanding. But she didn't. She kept walking. She didn't run. And she didn't let the weight of their presence reshape the lines of her dignity. What started as a routine evening stroll became a confrontation with the very systems designed to keep people like her in their place. The footage that captured her encounter didn't just show a dog growling or a woman refusing to step back. It revealed something deeper, the courage it takes to resist when power expects your submission, and the quiet rebellion of choosing not to disappear. Eleanor's strength wasn't loud. It wasn't theatrical. It didn't come from speeches or slogans. It came from presence, from discipline, from history, and it came from love. Love for the partner she lost for the dog she still had, and for the self she refused to abandon. Titan was more than a protector. He was the last gift of a woman who believed Eleanor would never need saving because she'd always been strong enough to stand. When the town turned and people began choosing sides, Eleanor didn't try to convince everyone. She didn't chase applause or beg for understanding. She spoke when it mattered. She testified when it counted. And in doing so, she forced a community and a justice system to see what it would rather ignore. In the end, the court found the officers guilty. But more importantly, the world saw a truth that could not be unseen, that bravery doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks. The lesson here is clear and vital. We live in a world where injustice often wears a polite smile, where intimidation comes dressed as concern, and where silence is too often mistaken for peace. Eleanor's story reminds us that integrity is not just what we believe in private, but what we are willing to stand for in public, even when no one is clapping. So ask yourself, where in your life are you being called to stand your ground? Maybe it's in your workplace. Maybe it's in your neighborhood. Maybe it's simply in how you show up for others who are being silenced. Whatever it is, let Eleanor's story remind you that dignity is not a gift. It's a decision. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something deep in your chest, then do us a favor, subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell, share this story, and help us continue to bring light to voices that need to be heard. Because stories like Eleanor's aren't just meant to be watched. They're meant to be remembered and repeated.